Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. We've got a great Figured Out Baseball podcast today. If you listen to enough podcasts on the Figured Out Baseball website, or if you follow Figured Out Baseball on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more, you know that I really like to talk with guys who've got a track record of winning. I really enjoy talking to coaches who have a lot of success on the field. I think there's a lot to learn from those kinds of coaches. And I just kind of get excited about it myself. So I'm really excited to have Justin Scali on the podcast today. He is the head coach at Piedmont University. Piedmont University is a very, very successful Division III program in Georgia. And I'll get into a background with Coach Scali here before we jump into questions with him so you can learn a little bit more about him. Today's podcast is brought to you by Diamond Kinetics. Coach Scali is originally from Long Island, New York. He played collegiately at Methodist University, one of the most successful historical Division III programs in the country. That's in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He graduated from Methodist in 2002. While he was there, the team went to 3 regionals. The 2002 team, when Coach Scali was a senior there, was ranked number 1 in the country for 8 straight weeks. They went 122 and 52 overall when he was there as a player. He spent his first 2 seasons as a coach, as an assistant coach at Ohio Northern University, a Division III school in Ada, Ohio. And from then, he's been at Piedmont. He was hired for the spring of 2005 as an assistant coach at Piedmont University. He was there from 2005 through 2016 as the pitching coach. And Piedmont, again, is a Division III school in Georgia. He was promoted for 2017 season to be the head coach, and he's been the head coach there since. The 2018 team finished 30-14. The 2019 team won the conference regular season championship. They were ranked as high as number 10 nationally, and they finished 29-10 overall. That year, 2019, Coach Scali was voted the conference coach of the year. 2020 was obviously a shortened season because of COVID. 2021, the team finished 21-16 overall. That was their 8th straight winning season as a program. In his time at Piedmont, Coach Scali has coached 18 all-conference players, 2 conference players of the year, 4 All-Americans, and he has compiled a cumulative record of 114 wins to only 67 losses. Coach Scali, I certainly appreciate being on the podcast today. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I typically like to start with something from the bio that stands out. And for me, a lot of it is the winning. A lot of places, pretty much everywhere that you've been very, very successful, and that's something that I think doesn't happen by accident, certainly not when it's kind of year after year after year. And I'm kind of anxious to know, you took over at Piedmont. It was already a very, very successful program with Jim Peoples there heading up the program before you, and he's now the AD at Piedmont. But you took over a program that had a history of success, and it's obviously continued under your tenure. Can you just talk a little bit about what you have learned over the years as a player, as an assistant coach, and now as a head coach? What are some of the key ingredients, in your opinion, to running a sustained program that is successful year after year after year? What are some of the key ingredients as the head coach?
Well, I think the biggest ingredient to us being successful is the fact that it's such a group effort. I know you were reading off some of the things that our program has accomplished. Here since I've been here, but it's certainly not me. It's starts with our assistant coaches. Do such a great job developing our players, but ultimately the success on the field comes from the players themselves. And it really starts with us recruiting good kids that are good students and good players, and trying to mentor them and to get out of them their very best on a day-to-day basis. I think one of the advantages of being here for a long time at Piedmont is we have a very established culture here. The expectations of from a work ethic standpoint, from a performance standpoint, from our standards and all those things. But when you've been somewhere a long time, a lot of times the players themselves, the leadership, the upperclassmen, the experienced players, do a lot of that culture implementation. It's really done by the players, peer to peer. And I really think that as I've been here longer, and we've had some successful years or seasons over the course of my time here, certainly it's the players doing the job on the field, but I really think it's about kind of the culture and the way we go about our business here, and our leaders, year in and year out, doing a great job of really implementing, our values, process over results, and team first mentality, and those things are at the forefront of what we do, and we certainly teach it and instruct it and educate our players in those aspects. But a lot of times it is ultimately our players that really lead the way in that area.
I want to talk a little bit more about culture, since you bring that up, and you gave a pretty good sort of a synopsis there of what culture is, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about it. And how do you define culture, Coach, when you first bring guys into your program? Is it something that you need to talk about? Is it something that you intentionally maybe mention at the first meeting or anything? Or is it something that players just sort of absorb almost by osmosis when they're there because of the upperclassmen that you have that have sort of established that? So I'm just kind of interested in how you sort of define culture and how you sort of set the standards there for what the culture looks like at Piedmont for the Piedmont baseball team.
Sure, I think it's multifaceted for sure. It starts really in the recruiting process. We talk with all of our recruits about the things that are most important to us, and that's, first and foremost, we're going to focus on our process goals every day. For our, when we're playing a game, we have process goals we're going after. And then, for example, we have one award in our program every year. It's Teammate of the Year. And it's voted on by the players. So we have, everybody has these kind of cliche things, but certainly we do as well. And team is really, first and foremost, a big part of it. When we recruit incoming players, we talk to them all about, at the end of the day, we have great kids in our program, but we ultimately don't care who gets the credit or who plays. We care about the scoreboard. First and foremost, that's going to be our focus. And, being a good teammate is something you can't control. They certainly can't control who's in the lineup or, which pitcher comes in out of the pen or who's the hitter off the bench or whatnot, but they certainly can control their reaction to it. And, when we see an opportunity to educate our players in that realm, through practice or preseason or whatever, we're certainly going to take that opportunity to make that correction from a mindset and approach standpoint. Obviously we're working really hard on individual skill development. Of course, that's a big part of it. We're working hard, strength conditioning and all those things. But by way of kind of culture, like you talked about, we really just hone in on the process. We tell our guys, when we're successful, win and loss wise, what did we do with our process, in those games? How was our process achievement that day? Or when we were successful on the scoreboard, so to speak. So really just kind of hone in that way, specific to gameplay. It's definitely a lot about our process goals.
So for someone that really is not familiar with the terms process goals, process achievement, things of that nature, can you just kind of describe that? Because, Coach, in these podcasts, I like to address certain things for if there are I believe we have a lot of coaches that listen to these podcasts that want to get better. Coaches that maybe they've been doing it for a long time, but they want to sort of take the next step forward, or maybe they're new coaches that are trying to learn from guys that have done it, that have had success, and they're trying to learn from that success. Can you define and talk about what it means to have a process goal, what it means to have, process achievement, how you sort of define and discuss those things within your program?
Sure, I'd love to delve into it a little bit more. We have 8 process goals that we go after in every game. And we know historically that if we get any 5 of the 8, we win 97% of the time. If we get less than 5, we win 30% of the time. So it's glaring when we get to that 5th process goal. So we have 4 on offense, 4 on defense. Offensively, quality at-bat, 50% of our at-bats are quality at-bats for the team in that game. And obviously there's a lot of different ways to qualify as a quality at-bat. A hit, a walk, a hit by pitch, an 8+ pitch at-bat, move a runner with nobody out, an RBI, sacrifice, those kind of things, right? We talk about that's one of our goals offensively. The next is freebies. We talk about getting freebies, and freebies for us are not just the walk, the hit by pitch, the error. We add dirt ball read. We count stolen bases in there. An opponent balk. We're looking for 9 freebies in a game. Another one, the third one, is a big inning. At least one a big inning, and a big inning for us is 3 or more. So an inning where we score 3 or more is we qualify that as the big one, and we try to get a big inning. And then lastly, score 7 runs. 7 or more runs is a yes or a no there. So that ultimately are the 4 offensive goals. Defensively, we're obviously trying to limit those things. So it's 4 or less runs allowed, 5 or less freebies allowed, no big inning allowed, and then collectively as a staff, 150 pitches or less for the staff in that game. And like I said, we're 85-3 when we get 5 or more process goals. We're 29-65 when we don't. So it's pretty glaring for us, and we send out stuff to our guys, like our record when we get 0, when we get 1, when we get 2, when we get 3, all the way up to 6, 7, 8. Obviously, if you're getting 8 process goals, you're pretty good that day. If you're getting 2 or 3, it's going to be really tough to win. And those are things like we talk with our guys about that stuff at length. And it's one of those things that's sometimes easier to talk about and harder to apply because we're all baseball players, right? We know the hitter gets in the batter's box and they're 0 for 3. You don't have a hit. So, can you stick to your process, which for us, you could be 2 for 3 in that game already. Maybe you've got 2 hard hit balls, or you had one of your at-bats with 8 pitches, or, you grounded out for an RBI, whatever the case might be. So you might be 2 for 3, by way of our metrics here. We don't talk about batting average. We don't talk about ERA. We don't talk about wins and saves and extra base hits and all those things. We really try to educate our players into those 8 process goals. And we can see it now, having done it for 5 seasons. Like, if we've got 2 runs scored in an inning, we've got a guy on third and 1 out, you'll hear someone in our dugout maybe say something to the effect of, let's get the big one, where they're sniffing that 1 process goal. Or conversely, if a pitcher gets out of an inning allowing 2 and stranded some guys, you'll hear some good limit coming out of our dugout because they didn't allow the big inning, So that's really where we're seeing it. But we track it very, closely. We have a big board that hangs up right outside our locker room door that has our schedule on it, and it's got green and red, assessment of process goals. Green is our color, so it's green when we make the process goal that day, and it's red when we don't. We have historical data on it. We know, what percentage of games we've for example, got a big inning in historically or season by season, or what percentage of games are we 150 pitches or less, etc. So we track it closely, and it's something that, it's certainly at the forefront of what we're doing. And I hope that kind of answers what you're looking for there, a little bit deeper dive into that process wall for us.
Yeah, that was great. We could probably turn the podcast off right now and call this a winner. That was awesome. And that's stuff that I think a lot of coaches have probably heard here or there, but it's just interesting to me that how much different programs put an emphasis on certain things or make certain things a priority. And I've never heard anybody – I've heard guys talk about I've heard other coaches talk about we have certain goals, and when we hit certain goals, like this is our percentage of winning. I've never heard anybody come out and say when we do this, we win 97% of the time. That's crazy. That's crazy, and that certainly gives your players, it gives them something to shoot for, of course, and help the team. Like just like you said, you can be 0 for 3 and go to your last at bat saying, I know that if I can work a free base here or do this or do that, then like I can help the team get to that process goal. And when I do that, like we're going to win. And that's pretty amazing to me. And the pitch count thing, I think there are probably a lot of coaches that listen to this that are, they love a quick game, and they love for their pitchers to, they have maybe smaller goals of a pitcher tries to get an out in 3 pitches or less, or try to have, 15 pitches or fewer in an inning or whatever. But I don't know. I don't know that I've ever had a coach that has sort of made a team goal of 150 pitches for the game and kind of correlate that into wins. I think that stuff is awesome. Coach, how do you define a big inning? That's one thing I want to kind of give people that are listening to this that are kind of really locked into this. How do you define a big inning for your pitching staff?
3 or more runs.
Okay.
So, 3 or more runs scored in the inning is a big inning. For us, that's kind of been, when we first did this in 2017, for example, we achieved the 50% quality at bats 77% of our games that year. And we thought about, my assistant at the time and I were talking about it and said, man, do we need to raise our goal to 55%, let's say? Well, then we looked at it and said, man, when we get 5 goals, we're undefeated, And then we looked at it again after 2018 and we had, we were 64% of the time that year. We were getting our QAB number. And we again said, let's keep the goals where they're at, because that magic number of 5, getting our 5 process goals was, so glaring to, it's happened 88 times and we have 85 wins in those 88 games. The 3 losses were, all 3 were 5 process goals. So if we've gotten 6 or more, we've been undefeated, but it was an 11 inning loss. It was a 1-0 loss and a walk-off in the 9th inning. Like, they're these kind of quirky, kind of outlier games, but typically 5 process goals for us is going to be that end result that we really, it's the one we woke up thinking about a win. But that's a big goal. If we can simplify our approach into just individually going after doing things that help achieve the team process goals. If you steal a base or you read a dirt ball, hey, that's one of the 9 we need today to get to our process goal, for that freebie one. And if we get 5 process goals, odds are we're going to win.
It's really profound also because, sitting here on the phone, but trying to imagine yourself in the dugout, baseball is such an individual team sport is a kind of a way that I describe it to people, right? Because you have individual battles throughout the game, pitcher versus hitter, or you have one player on defense making a play or whatever it may be. But and when baseball, I think when teams go wrong, it becomes too much about the individual, not enough about the team, and that finding that balance is sometimes hard to do. But this process that you've got seems like the individual is trying to achieve for the team. Like, when your guys know that if we get 5 of these process goals, we're going to win, they're up there, of course, as an individual trying to compete and trying to win. But then, like, the result of that personal win is that you get your team closer to the goal for the day, which is, it's not always easy to really sort of make that finite in a way. And it seems like that you've done that, which I think this is amazing. I think this is great. Is that, do you find that with your guys? Like, do you find that that's sort of the result of what you guys are doing there and how this plays out with all the individuals on your team?
Conceptually, that's certainly the goal, right? Like, exactly what you're saying is we want it to be first and foremost about my individual success is going to ultimately help the team. And I think, that's still a learned skill. Because, as you mentioned, like baseball, just naturally, like, I know if I go out there and give up runs, like as a pitcher, that's going to, hurt our chances of winning, right? So I'm more concerned now with my own performance, right? Like, how do I make the adjustment to just, be where my feet are at? Let me just try to execute the next pitch, or let me have swing at a good pitch in the batter's box. If I hit the ball hard, regardless of the result, I get a quality at bat. And that's what, we find little chance. I don't coach the bases, and I find little opportunities to get our players mentally back to their process. Like, for example, I find myself often late in games, big at bats, in the games coming up, I'll find myself looking to our on deck hitter who's just, 10 feet off to my right, get his attention and look at him and say, just a cue. All we need you to do is have a cue. If you go up there saying it's a runner on second, we're down to run, I got to get a hit and got to tie this game up. Well, obviously that's what we all want. Clearly we need that. But if we can make his approach in the batter's box of controlling what you can control, which is what pitch do I swing at? What is my plan? What am I going to get? Not what do I want to hit? Those kind of things. Well, now we're within things we can control. And getting a hit is so difficult. And getting a hit when, you can do everything right and not be rewarded with one we just really try to slow our guys down in those pressure moments and say, just a cue, or for our pitchers, how about a first pitch strike? How about some strike percentage here? Obviously we need you to get this guy out, preferably, not advancing a runner or whatever the case might be. But we try to apply it in that sense. Exactly your description is exactly what we're hoping for. It certainly doesn't come automatically. It's certainly a learned skill. But at the end of the day, it's really what, we're after.
Where did all this come from for you? You said you started it in 2017, your first year as the head coach. Where did you learn this? Where did you come across this? Or was it something that you had been thinking about for a long time and you kind of knew, when I'm a head coach, this is something we're going to do? I'm just curious where it all started for you.
Well, like everything, like most places, like a lot of what I do as a head coach, we found somewhere else and applied it to the way we want to do it, right? So this was no different here. We were at that fall before our 2017 season. My assistant and I were, had the opportunity to go watch Clemson practice. And Coach Lee and his staff utilized a variation of this. And he was just such a class, first class individual, treated me with so much respect, and just was so willing to talk baseball with a guy from a small school that he didn't know very well, but gave us we knew some guys on his staff at the time, and were extended an opportunity to come watch practice, and it kind of toured their facility, and we came across their variation of this and kind of got asking about how they apply it. And, we were certainly looking for something like this, and, it just was, we felt like we could really adapt this to fit, our goals.
How did the players first take to this when you first introduced it? Because it was obviously new to them at the time. Was it kind of a slow process for them to sort of come around to it, or when you first introduced it, was it something that they were able to grab onto and run with pretty quickly?
I think it was initially slow, but I think what really helped it come along was that magic number of 5. Like, they saw, man, if we get 5 process goals, like in that first season, we were undefeated when we got 5. So it was easy for us to say, and we had, we were just okay that year. We weren't a great club early. We were 19-0 when we got our 5, and we were 5-20 when we didn't. So, that's how you go 24-20. But boy, was it easy to see when we got going and what was equating to wins, right? And that's a language I think that every player, that's easily translates to players, right? Like, we're out there to win games, right? We're putting a ton of work in. So when we see the results, that magic number of 5, as I keep coming back to, but when we see it translating to wins for us, and again, there's a lot of different ways. A lot of teams, a lot of programs are doing exactly what we're doing. So they're tracking these things. They have their goals, and they're, those kind of things. We certainly do other, we're tracking other data too, just like everyone else. But for whatever reason, we started with this. We've continued doing it. We like having it in front of our players. The board, the process achievement board, sits above the water fountain in our facility, and I find myself in pregame meeting a lot of times, kind of ending it with, we're not playing the team in the other dugout, today. Our opponent sits above the water fountain. And I'm sure our guys roll their eyes. They've heard that a lot. But, it's kind of something that I like to touch on with, hey, that's what we're going after. Independent of who's in the other dugout, we know when we handle our process, we're good enough to win,
That's something that I've said to players. I'm sure it's something that so many coaches have said to players, and you're right, players might roll their eyes when they hear it. But I used to just flat out tell players that, like, we're not playing the team in the dugout. We're playing against ourselves today. And everybody maybe presents it, coaches present it a little bit differently. And you guys, you have a system where it's really kind of laid out where guys can see that. But I think it's such a true thing in this sport, in our sport of baseball, that if a team, if you are a talented team and you go out and play a really clean game and individuals, play well, and as a team you play well, you're going to win a lot. But on days when you sort of underachieve as a group, whether it's because of just a bad day or a lack of focus, or you're in a really good arm or whatever, and you underachieve as a team, then you're going to lose a lot. And that's kind of how I used to present it to players, is if we play well for our own standards today, we're going to win most of the time. And I think it's so cool to just be able to have a way to quantify that.
Yeah, I mean, we like to think that there's not a team on our schedule that can't beat us, but conversely, there's not a team on our schedule that we can't beat, or not a team in the country we can't beat, but everyone can certainly beat us. Our best we feel like is pretty good, but our average loses to a lot of good programs. So if we play just okay, we're probably going to get beat up. We're going to get beat around that day because we do play a good schedule. We want to compete against the best teams in the country. This weekend we have 3 teams coming in that are perennially, in the top 25. They've a national runner-up in 19, a national champion in 2017, and then Christopher Newport, who's been to a bucket full of College World Series. Like, that's a good little tournament for us to open the year. But from a coach's perspective, it's the most rewarding to play against people where you need to bring your best to come out with a good result, because otherwise playing those people is what it's all about. It's why we do it. When it comes time to compete, turn the lights on, you want to see how you stack up against the best programs in the country. And we're certainly excited to get that going this weekend with an opportunity to play against 3 top 25 caliber programs that have long-standing quality coaches that have done a great job with their program year after year after year. And it's really an honor for us to compete against them. But for us, just because the opponents are good, again, for us, it's going to circle right back to this process. If we get 5 of our process goals on Thursday, it's likely we'll get a win.
I think I think it's really cool, and I think it's just amazing for your players to kind of see that. And anytime coaches can go to their players and say, when we do this, we win, type of thing. And I just think it means a lot to players to be able to actually see how things are going to play out. And I want to come back to the playing the good teams and a lot of the winning type stuff that we've touched on so far. And I said before the podcast that was, one of the reasons I was excited to have you on. But I do want to ask, before we get to that, the process goals, the 8 process goals that you have, I'm sure it's a lot easier to get there when you're playing certain teams. It's a lot easier to get there in a midweek game when you're facing somebody's number 4 or 5 starter or whatever. What does that look like when you play someone's ace? And what I mean by that is, so your hitters come into the day facing one of the best pitchers in the conference, and obviously like today's going to be a tough day. How does that? It's not going to be an easy day. I should say it's not going to be an easy day. How do your hitters approach that day as far as like what we need to do to achieve 5 of our 8 process goals? And conversely with your pitchers, when you face maybe the best team, the best offense in the conference, and particularly on a day when like your ace isn't going for you, how do you approach those days when it's going to be a little bit more difficult? Like, are your players kind of aware going in that today's going to be a tough day because of the opponent for whatever reason, so we really got to compete to try to get to maybe these couple process goals because these other ones are going to be a little bit harder to achieve, such as scoring 7 runs. Scoring 7 runs is going to be really tough on a day when you're facing somebody else's ace. So do your players sort of and your coaching staff maybe put a little more emphasis on some of the other categories? I'm curious what that looks like when when it's the most difficult games you're going to play during the season, and how it maybe affects or changes the focus a little bit to some of the process goals as opposed to other ones, or just if it's the same every day.
Yeah, great question. To be honest, it doesn't change it one bit. Our mindset is right or wrong. They have to play us. So we have a good team coming in Thursday, but our mindset is that it's going to be a tough matchup for us, but it's going to be a tough matchup for them, right? That's not in a cocky or arrogant way, but that means, we're working hard too. And yeah, you're 100% right. There are certain games and opponents and matchups where some of the goals are going to be harder to get than others, but we may have to go after, maybe it's hard to score 7, but we can score 3 in an inning. Maybe it's a bunt play. Maybe it's a double steal. Maybe it's a different way to, achieve them. You can get quality at-bats and score less runs in a game, or, maybe we're limiting them on the defensive side that day. We've had plenty of games over the years where we get 4 on offense and only 1 on defense, or vice versa, where we picked up 4 of our process goals on the mound and defensively and didn't have our best day at the plate, but got to the 5, right? So it's any 5. It's always been any 5. We talk about it being any 5. It doesn't have to be 2 and 2. It doesn't have to be 3 and 1 or 1 and 3, whatever. It's about the team. So yeah, for sure. Everybody knows that. You play college baseball, a lot of times on a Friday night, you're going to have, you're going to be facing a horse, a talented, experienced pitcher. But, the flip side of that is so are they, and we're going to go after, our process goals independent of the opponent, independent of the matchup, independent of, who we're playing. Now, obviously, our kids have the internet. They know when good people are coming in here. But, the only thing I address specific to the schedule is, hey, we're playing some teams this weekend that need our best to get the results we want. If we're not going to be able to be at average and get a good result, it's just not. They're too talented and too well coached to come in and play just okay and come away with wins. So we certainly have to be on top of our game to get it, but it may look differently process-wise. The other takeaway with this process board for us that maybe I didn't reference is we're 22 and 18 when we get 4. And that's really a coin flip game. And 4 process goals means you probably did a lot of things right, but maybe it was one of those kind of Friday night games you talked about, or you get a nationally ranked opponent or whatever. And a lot of times when we've got 4 process goals specifically, it's about, now it's the big play at the end of the game. Did you make a big pitch? Did you make the routine play with 2 guys on late? Did you, pick up a 2-out hit? Were you able to get a good read on a dirt ball? Did you get a bang-bang call safe? Those kind of things. Like, that's really a coin flip. It's really blatant when we get 3-2, 1 or 0. That's when we're really not winning. It's 7 and 48, I think, when we get 3 or less. It's 29 and 65 when we get 4 or less. And 4 is always, we're basically a 500 club when we get 4. So that does apply sometimes, but, that's kind of the long way to answer your question of the opponent doesn't dictate our process. We dictate our process. The goals don't change. We're aware, I think, subconsciously, at least as coaches, that, yeah, it may be tough to score 7 against an All-American starting pitcher, but it's not that it doesn't happen. It's not that, maybe we have a lot of long at-bats and we get to the bullpen or, whatever the case might be. There's different ways to go after it, but it's not going to change our approach or process.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Diamond Kinetics. No matter what season you're in, our friends at Diamond Kinetics are here to help you train smarter and get better so you can dominate on the field this season. DK's line of mobile-based motion technology products give players and coaches the ability to practice smarter, practice more effectively, and have more confidence in the batter's box and on the mound. DK's Pitch Tracker Smart Baseball and mobile app provides easy-to-understand data, metrics, and pitching analysis right at your fingertips. You'll immediately see velocity, spin rate, and spin direction on all of your pitches. And newly updated features such as auto pitch detection, plus newly added metrics such as spin efficiency and horizontal and vertical break help you get command and control over your entire arsenal of pitches. With Diamond Kinetics, you will train smarter and get better and have more confidence on the field this spring. You kind of talked there about how you talk to your team, how you approach games against really good teams. And I think sometimes for winning programs and players that are used to winning in a culture of winning, it's easier sometimes to kind of get up and get focused for the really good teams. Because as you said, as a coach, you kind of approach the players like we need to have a good game today. We need to be focused. You need to achieve our goals, kind of stay within ourselves and do the things that we do to win. And I think that, again, the players know that it's going to take a good effort on their part to get a win that day. Sometimes against bad teams, the focus is not always there. And sometimes when you have a really good program, it's harder for the guys to get focused on a team that, I mean, you kind of said just a few minutes ago that when you're playing a really good team, your players know that they can't just show up today and win. But sometimes you play those teams where you probably can just kind of show up and win because you're a lot better than them. There aren't a lot of those teams around, but I know that there are teams like that. How do you approach your team on those days, Coach Scali, just to keep your guys focused and to keep them as sharp as they need to be? Because even when you're playing the bad team, you're still what you're ultimately doing all through the regular season is preparing yourself for the postseason, right? I mean, you're every day
100%.
you're preparing
100%.
yourself for the end goal. So how do you keep your guys focused and sharp and at their peak competitiveness on a day when you're playing a team when you sort of all know, coaches and players, that there's not going to be a lot of fight in this team? How do you keep your guys sharp on those days?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly try to meet it up front. Like, I'll try to find ways to manufacture motivation for us in that particular game, or I'll point out, maybe teams that took them lightly and lost, historically, or, if there's any way to reference, an opportunity where somebody's taken someone lightly and not been successful at the end of the day, we're going to find that. Remind our team, too, that we're ultimately not good enough to take people lightly. And again, that's not a slight to our kids or our team or our program, but we're just not. We're not, we have to play our best to win, independent of the opponent. And like you said, we don't play a lot of games, if any, where, we feel like the outcome is decided prior to first pitch. I mean, for the most part, everyone we play can beat us. And we give, my college coach used to say it, and we have utilized this phrase as well, but it's respect everyone, fear no one, right? So everyone gets our full attention and respect. We do the same scouting report. We do the same preparation leading into that weekend series, or we do the same review about what we feel like is going to make us successful against this group, what we feel like they're going to try to do to us, how we've combated that in the past, what their style of play is. We take no shortcuts by way of our preparation, at least on the coaching side. Now, I'm not naive. Like I said, I know that our kids probably, the couple games a year where we may feel like, they may feel like, we're probably going to win today. We try very hard to snap them out of that mindset, because it's nothing but dangerous. When you don't respect the opponent, it's the beauty of baseball, right? So when you look at the major leagues, every team wins 60 games and loses 60 games, right? So our sport is not football. I'm a Giants fan, right? So New York Football Giants, diehard fan. We haven't been very good. If we play the Chiefs or the Bengals, or we're not winning. But in baseball, a different home plate umpire, maybe a pitcher gets hot, a couple bad hops, the other team lines out a bunch, right? Like, teams that are, quote, maybe on paper not supposed to win way more often in baseball than any sport, right? The defense starts with the ball. It's a very unique game. So I just try to kind of reiterate those facts, like, I don't know who the worst team was in Major League Baseball, maybe Baltimore. They probably won over 50 times. I know they took a couple series from the Yankees. I'm a Yankees fan too. So when you think about it by way of on paper, it doesn't really apply in baseball. And that's what I kind of try to educate our guys with,
You talked about playing good teams as well, and wanting to compete against the best. So I'd love to talk with you about winning for a while.
Sure.
During this podcast, and I want to kind of start with that. You have a big weekend this coming weekend where you've got a tournament against three very, very competitive teams, and teams in the South, and in all conferences they have teams from northern climates that come down early in the year before conference, and they'll play home series or a tournament or whatever. And a lot of those teams, sometimes teams are bringing down really, really good competition. Sometimes those teams are bringing down teams they feel like they should have a chance to win 2 out of 3 or sweep the series or whatever. I'm curious as to your mentality and just your plan, your approach to starting with 3 really tough teams, and just generally making as competitive of a schedule as you can. What's the reason for that, Coach, and how do you feel like that affects your team, going through the rest of your season if that's how you begin it?
Yeah, a couple factors really. Number one, like you said, we feel if we're going to get where we ultimately want to be at the end of the year, the teams that we have coming in this weekend are the caliber of teams we're going to have to play to get there, or play when we do get there if we're fortunate enough. So that's first and foremost. But the other factor is, NCAA at-large selection being what it is. Strength of schedule, opponent strength of schedule are such important factors in, at-large selection that at the end of the day, you've got to play the best possible schedule you can play in order to maximize your access to NCAA postseason play. Like in 2018 and 2019, we were nationally and regionally ranked. We weren't fortunate enough to get an NCAA tournament selection, but strength of schedule was certainly something that was, it's a primary selection criteria. So we are going to schedule as difficult as we can intentionally, because, again, those 2 factors, the at-large selection, if we're not fortunate enough to win our conference's automatic bid, but number 2, when we do get there, and the 2 times we've gotten there since I've been here at Piedmont, we weren't intimidated by our opponent. We certainly respected them and knew they were good, but our kids were not shell-shocked with the skill sets of the teams we played in the NCAA tournament, because we had seen them before, seen teams of that caliber before.
I think it's a really big thing when you get to the postseason, especially for your players to be able to say, we've been here before, we've played these kinds of teams before, and then your guys, I think, feel prepared when they get there, obviously. You said something early in the podcast that I want to come back to along the lines of winning, Coach Scali, just about you said we care about the scoreboard. And I don't know that that's let me backtrack a bit. I think that a problem with youth sports is that there's too much focus on the scoreboard. And I mean like little kids. In fact, I just had a friend yesterday that I saw that he's got a 9-year-old that's not a real athletic kid, but he last year was the first year he played organized baseball, and he said at the end of the season there were players on their team, like, I don't know what the age group was, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, something like that, and they had kids crying in the outfield when they lost their like local league championship, and this guy played Division II baseball himself, and he was like, if that's how it's going to be, like, I don't know if I even want to have my kid in the league. So I think that youth baseball, the focus on winning at the very young ages is too much, but sometimes in older age groups, the focus is more on development and not so much on winning. But I'd love to talk with you about, why and how that's a priority for you, and maybe what a conversation looks like when you're talking with recruits. And, obviously you also mentioned development. It's not that you don't develop players, but you
Right.
care about winning and you care about the scoreboard at the end of the day. What are some conversations that you have with your players, either on the team or recruits, to kind of get that message across, Coach? And why is that so? Why is winning a priority within your program? Because I've heard other guys that kind of say, well, when we focus on this or that, like winning is just a byproduct. But like it seems like it, to you at the end of the day, it is important whether or not you won or lost. Can you just talk about that a little bit, why that is, and maybe how you have that conversation with players or recruits to kind of get that message across that this is important to us?
Sure. I mean, I think it's, certainly for us, we address it in the recruiting process with our players as they're incoming, and we address it, regularly with our guys here at practice, where it's like, hey guys, personnel decisions are not personal, if that makes sense, right? So if it's who gets the uniform numbers or who gets to travel or dress or pitch or hit or whatever, it's going to be performance and merit based, right? So it's completely out in the open. Now, our players from time to time are certainly going to disagree with my assessment of our depth chart, let's say, right? Which they have full right to do, and we're certainly going to have conversations, throughout the year with many players pertaining to that. But at the end of the day, it's just the way we phrase it is that the scoreboard and performance is going to dictate opportunity. And the better you play, the more your opportunity, the bigger your role gets. No role on the first day is the same as it is on the last day. We have a lot of variables in there: performance, injury. In today's day and age, COVID, we have guys in and out with stuff like that. So those are it's fluid. Those things change from time to time, but certainly that's just kind of our mindset is performance is going to dictate opportunity. And I think our players know that. We've worked very hard to try to properly communicate that in the recruiting process, and as well through our practice time frame, also.
You also talked about some things that you do, well, just even your process goals. A lot of them have a team focus, a sort of a team at the center of your process goals. Is that something that takes a while for players to kind of catch on to, because as I mentioned, the upper levels of youth baseball, kind of like high school age players, unfortunately to me, baseball is so backwards in that way. 8, 9, 10-year-old teams, they want to go to a tournament and come back with a giant plastic ring on their finger. And like high school kids don't care if they win or lose. A lot of times they care about their personal development and getting their innings in and things of that nature, where the game becomes a lot about them at the older levels. Is that something that you find to be difficult to coaching your players once they get there? Does it take players a while to kind of catch on to this team mentality where, moving a runner is a good thing even if you get out? Or like, we might bunt from time to time. I know players don't bunt much in high school, but you guys, if you become a part of Piedmont baseball, you might get asked to bunt from time to time, and when you get asked, you need to be successful with that. How difficult is that how difficult is that message to get across to your players in this day and age, Coach? And is that something that, like, during the recruiting process, do you feel like you weed guys out who maybe don't want to be a part of that type of setting?
I wouldn't say we weed guys out from that perspective in the recruiting process, but it's certainly, guys come to that skill, on their own time frame. But we talk to our guys, anytime it's evident to us where someone's making something about themselves, we're going to point it out, right? Like, a guy throws a bat down or something like that. Well, that's a complete, that's about me, right? That's, I didn't do what I wanted to do, or somebody snatches at the ball, back from the pitcher, from the catcher. It's a little thing. It's not really the end of the world, but ultimately, that's your own individual frustration, right? And your job in our program as a player, hitter or pitcher, or, whatever you're playing, is to, try to get where your feet are at and try to, let's get after the next pitch. It certainly doesn't happen overnight. It certainly didn't happen overnight for me as a player. So I can respect and appreciate, I hold no grudges or ill will when I make these corrections in practice. I know for a young player, it's going to take them some time to be able to process that I don't like how that went. What adjustment can I make to fix it? Let me get ready for this next play, pitch, whatever, and not waste time with this outward negative emotion or body language expression. That some guys come with that, some guys it takes a while, and some guys it may take 2 years, right? So everybody kind of processes that differently. It comes from such a good place, though. And I tell our kids that all the time. I know where it's coming from. You want to do well for yourself, for your teammates, for the program, for the P logo. I get it, right? So it's coming from that place. But ultimately, it certainly is it's something we practice. It's certainly something we're going to practice.
How do you practice those types of things? What do your practices look like? Just curious about.
Specific to that, like I said, I'm going to point it out in front of the whole team. And then sometimes it may feel like, for the individual getting that coaching correction about, hey, fix your body language, or hey, don't snatch at the ball, or it's not the bat's fault, or hey, our rule is the helmets don't touch the ground here. Like, they touch your head or the helmet rack, right? So we'll make these little coaching corrections loud enough for the entire team to see it. Hey, we don't do that here. It's okay, you're frustrated. Use it for the next pitch, right? So that's kind of where it is. It's whenever myself or our assistants see an opportunity to really get us back to our process, we're going to take advantage of coaching them.
Are your practices, well, let me ask this. How big are your practices as far as sort of establishing things that you want to happen with your team? Maybe it's the pace of play, or maybe it's just the style, or working on some specific process goals during practice. Are your practices like very intense and very focused on individual specific things? Are your practices like fairly relaxed, particularly like once you get into to the season where guys are just kind of getting their reps in because they've already sort of established what they need to do? Just curious what Piedmont practices look like, and I mean, if that's different at different times of the year, I'd love to hear that as well. But just curious of what the atmosphere, what the focus level, the speed of play, or just the most important things are at Piedmont baseball practices.
Sure, and I just had a player walk in my office, so he'd probably answer it as well. But at the end of the day, when we design practice, for us, it's about, number one, it's going to be organized and structured, right? So if it's a scrimmage day, we're going to have it, I want it to flow smoothly. When we scrimmage, like, for example, yesterday, I'm over there taking a lot of notes, right? Different plays that happen during games, different scenarios, or it may force me to think of another scenario that could happen in a different angle or what have you. And then I'm going to make those coaching corrections or points at the end to the whole group. And I may make it during the game too, That's what a scrimmage looks like. When we practice, traditional practice, there's going to be some individual segments, and there's going to be some team segments, and there's going to be some pitching aspects, obviously, and then, of course, some batting practice aspects too. But, so it's multifaceted, really. When we scrimmage, it's really about our process. When we're at a traditional practice, now it's more about individual skill stuff. Maybe it's a bullpen. Maybe it's, if we have the infielders out for early out defense, that day, and they're going to work on, skills specific to their position or skills specific to plays they've been, wanting to work on or struggling with or what have you. So it's really multifaceted. But the one thing we try to be is organized. I know I try very hard as well to communicate with our players in advance. I don't want a player walking down to practice not knowing what's going on. I know a lot of coaches feel differently about that. They want the players to be able to move on the fly and adjust, which, of course, you have to be able to do. But I know as a player, I was so type A that I wanted to know, what time do I need to be there? What do I need to be prepared for today? What are we going to do, et cetera. It's probably why I was a terrible relief pitcher and a better starting pitcher, because I knew what time the game started, and I knew what nine guys were going to get in there, and I could take my 52-minute warm-up routine exactly how I wanted to do it, and that's probably me just projecting my own personality to our program, but that's just how, typically how we practice.
Coach, the last thing I want to ask you as we wrap this up, how do you, at the end of the season, when you look back and evaluate, which I'm sure that you do from year to year, or I'm guessing that you do anyway, that you look back on a season after it's over, how do you ultimately decide whether that was a successful season or not a successful season in your own compared to your own expectations? What makes a successful season to you when it's over? If you look back on a season, I'm sure there are some where you say, some you're happy with, some you're not happy with, some you feel great about, some you don't feel good about. What are some of the things that go into that for you when you look back? I mean, you've had several seasons now as a head coach. You lost one where it wasn't a full season, obviously, but you've had several full seasons under your belt now as a head coach. So when you look back and evaluate a season, what are some things that kind of sway your emotion or your final analysis of whether that was a successful season or not?
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, I'm really big on as soon as games end, I keep a little notebook with me. And, once I've shaken the other coach's hand while the field's getting cleaned up, I'm going to go right to my little journal. And I'm going to jot some things down. I keep notes on umpires, and then I'm going to keep some notes down about maybe decisions I made, maybe things to think about, areas I want to get better. Because ultimately, the losses are mine and the wins are for the players. And, I think at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, we're obviously trying to be super competitive here. Winning is super important to us. But what I get the most satisfaction out of is the relationship with our players, and that's really why I coach. Now, of course, when it comes time, Thursday at 3 o'clock, it's about winning, right? But at the end of the day, we use the competition environment to form relationships with our players and watching them get better, and then trying to figure out how I myself can get better. I can communicate better. I can manage assistant coaches better. I can make better in-game decisions. I can make these adjustments scouting. What things can I do to make the experience better for our players? Maybe it's different equipment. Maybe it's a new camera system. Maybe it's whatever the case might be. But, at the end of the day, obviously wins and losses are pretty easy to look at to assess your level of success, but that's certainly not the be-all, end-all. Relationships with players, individual improvement for players, and then individual improvement for myself. Did I get better, through this season? Hopefully the answer is yes, and if not, where can I make strides, personally, to be a better coach for my players?
I should have asked that question earlier because there's a lot of stuff there I'd like to talk about, but that'll have to come in part two.
Like I said, I just had a guy swing in the office, so I apologize. We probably should have got to that a little earlier.
No, that was definitely. I should have asked that question a little earlier. But this is Justin Scali, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Justin Scali is the head coach at Piedmont University in Georgia, one of the most a really successful Division III program, and he's a guy that's had a lot of success everywhere he's been. So this has been a very, very enjoyable podcast for me personally. I come into podcast coaching. I kind of expect to learn some things every time that I get on a podcast now, and I do most of the time. And from you, I've learned a lot. This has been very, very enjoyable for me personally. I've learned a good bit. Hopefully, the people that are listening to this have learned as much. But I just want to thank you for your time today. I know it's a really busy time of the year for you. Obviously, you have players coming in your office. You're playing later this week in a big tournament. So I just want to just thank you for your time and to just tell you how much we appreciate you being a part of Figured Out Baseball and our podcasts.
Sure thing, Jeff. I really appreciate you having me. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity to promote our program and really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for having me.